In the summer of 1940, Europe was engulfed in chaos. The German Wehrmacht had swept through France with astonishing speed, leaving devastation in its wake. The British Isles stood as the last major power resisting Hitler's domination in Western Europe. The fate of an entire continent now rested on the determination of a nation that had known peace for decades, but was now facing the looming shadow of a relentless enemy. As German troops celebrated victory on the European mainland, British leaders recognized the urgency of the moment. Prime Minister Winston Churchill, resolute and unyielding, rallied his nation with words that would echo through history. "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." The threat was clear. The Luftwaffe, Germany's formidable air force, would soon rain terror upon the British skies, aiming to destroy the Royal Air Force and pave the way for a full-scale invasion known as Operation Sea Lion. Britain's hope rested on a combination of courage, ingenuity, and a remarkable new fighter aircraft, the Supermarine Spitfire. Sleek, fast, and highly maneuverable, the Spitfire was more than a machine. It became a symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope in the face of overwhelming odds. Alongside the sturdy Hawker Hurricane, these aircraft formed the backbone of Britain's air defense, ready to confront the might of the Luftwaffe head-on. In the hangars of RAF Fighter Command, young pilots prepared tirelessly. Many were barely out of their teens, yet their commitment was unwavering. They learned to trust their instincts and their aircraft, knowing that every sortie might be their last. Among them was Flight Lieutenant James Allen, who described his first flight in a Spitfire as an almost spiritual experience. "It felt alive," he said later, "as if the plane itself understood every thought and every movement I made." The challenge, however, was immense. The Luftwaffe was not merely a collection of planes. It was a well-trained, disciplined force, experienced in the devastating tactics of blitzkrieg. Its goal was simple yet terrifying: dominate the skies, destroy Britain's airfields and infrastructure, and break the spirit of the nation. Every sortie flown by the RAF would be a contest of skill, courage, and endurance. In early July 1940, the first skirmishes over the English Channel began. Small formations of Spitfires and Hurricanes met the well-coordinated Luftwaffe patrols. These initial encounters were deadly, each engagement a test of nerves and skill. Pilots quickly realized that even a slight miscalculation could prove fatal. Yet the British pilots adapted swiftly, relying on strategy, teamwork, and their intimate knowledge of local skies. The battle intensified in the weeks that followed. Luftwaffe bombers targeted ports, airfields, and industrial centers, attempting to weaken Britain's defensive capabilities. RAF pilots responded with relentless determination, often flying multiple sorties in a single day. Each victory, no matter how small, was a morale boost. Each loss, a sobering reminder of the stakes involved. Despite the relentless pressure, Britain endured. The Spitfire proved itself in dogfights against the formidable Messerschmitt Bf 109, its agility and speed often tipping the balance in the RAF's favor. Pilots learned to exploit every advantage, using altitude, sun position, and tactical maneuvers to outwit their opponents. These lessons, learned in the heat of combat, would prove decisive in the battles to come. As summer turned to autumn, the skies over Britain became the stage for a struggle of unprecedented scale. The coming months would test every pilot, mechanic, and citizen. The Spitfire, once just a new aircraft in the hangars of Fighter Command, had become a symbol of national resolve and courage. It embodied the determination of a people unwilling to bow to tyranny. The battle for Britain was not merely a contest of machines and weapons. It was a battle of will, spirit, and resilience. Every sortie flown by the Spitfire carried with it the hopes of a nation, a statement that Britain would not surrender quietly, and that even in the darkest hours, courage could prevail. As the first serious attacks rained upon the southern coast, it became clear that the skies themselves had become the new front line, a front line where the fate of a nation would be decided by the bravery of a few daring pilots and the steadfast resolve of an entire people. As July turned into August 1940, the German Luftwaffe intensified its efforts over the English Channel. Early reconnaissance flights revealed the layout of British airfields, ports, and key infrastructure. The Germans believed that by destroying a RAF Fighter Command, they could achieve air superiority, a prerequisite for Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Britain. On the morning of August 12th, the first significant attacks began. German bombers, escorted by fighters, crossed the channel under the protection of early morning clouds. Their targets were the southern airfields, including RAF Manston, Biggin Hill, and Hornchurch. British radar stations, part of the newly developed chain home system, picked up incoming formations, and relayed the information to Fighter Command. Within minutes, Spitfires and Hurricanes scrambled into the skies. Flight Lieutenant James Allen, now leading a squadron of 6 Spitfires, recalled the tension as the planes climbed into the sunlit sky. "You could feel the air change," he said. "There was a silence that hung over us, almost as if the world itself was holding its breath." Then in the distance you could see them, hundreds of planes, precise and relentless. The first engagements were chaotic. The Luftwaffe's Messerschmitt Bf-109s proved formidable, cutting through clouds with deadly efficiency. Yet the Spitfires, with their superior maneuverability and responsive controls, matched them in every turn. Pilots relied on both instinct and training, executing split-second maneuvers that often determined life or death. Each dogfight was a ballet of machines, each pilot acutely aware that a single misstep could be fatal. Meanwhile, German bombers pressed toward their targets. They dropped tons of explosives on airfields, hangars, and fuel depots. Fires erupted, illuminating the chaos below. British ground crews scrambled to repair runways, extinguish flames, and rearm the fighters who had just returned from combat. The cycle of attack and response continued through the day, testing the endurance of every man in the RAF. Despite the relentless attacks, British defenses adapted quickly. Radar operators refined their tracking, pilots learned to anticipate the tactics of the Luftwaffe, and commanders coordinated intercepts with increasing precision. Small victories, such as shooting down a bomber formation before it reached its target, proved that determination and skill could offset the enemy's numerical advantage. By late August, the Luftwaffe shifted strategy. Recognizing that RAF airfields were resilient and heavily defended, they began targeting London itself, initiating what would later be known as the Blitz. While intended to break civilian morale, these attacks inadvertently gave the RAF time to regroup and repair its airfields, preserving the strength of Britain's fighter force. Among the pilots, the pressure was immense. Young men flew multiple sorties each day, often with little rest. They faced exhaustion, fear, and the constant threat of death. Yet, each mission also reinforced a collective sense of purpose. For the British, the Spitfire became more than a plane. It embodied the spirit of resistance and the will to defend their homeland. By early September, it became evident that the Luftwaffe had underestimated the resolve of Britain's defenders. The Battle of Britain was no longer a test of aircraft or tactics alone. It was a contest of endurance, courage, and national determination. Every engagement in the skies above southern England sent a clear message. Britain would fight, and every Spitfire that returned from battle carried the hopes of a nation determined to survive. The first storm of German attacks set the tone for the months to come. Pilots, mechanics, and civilians alike understood that their lives were entwined with the outcome of every sortie, every aerial skirmish, and every dogfight. The skies over Britain had become the front line, and in this new theater of war, the smallest act of bravery could tip the balance between survival and defeat. By the late summer of 1940, the skies over southern England had become a battlefield of unprecedented intensity. The Luftwaffe's attacks were relentless, and the fate of Britain seemed to hang on a delicate thread. Yet, amidst this turmoil, a new force emerged, the supermarine Spitfire. Sleek, fast, and highly maneuverable, the Spitfire was unlike any fighter the world had seen. It was more than just an aircraft. It was a symbol of hope, a promise that Britain would not bow to tyranny. Flight Lieutenant James Allen and his squadron were among the first to fly the Spitfire into combat. The first time he climbed into the cockpit, he felt an unfamiliar sense of awe. The controls responded like extensions of his own hands. Every movement was precise, every turn smooth and calculated. Flying a Spitfire was unlike anything I had ever experienced, he later recounted. It was as if the plane could anticipate what I wanted to do before I did it myself. The first major engagements with the Luftwaffe revealed just how formidable the Spitfire truly was. Messerschmitt Bf-109s, which had dominated the skies over France, now faced an opponent that could match them in speed, outmaneuver them in turns, and strike with deadly accuracy. In the hands of skilled RAF pilots, the Spitfire became a lethal counter to Germany's aerial supremacy. On September 15, 1940, a date that would later be remembered as one of the most critical of the Battle of Britain, the Luftwaffe launched one of its largest attacks yet. Hundreds of bombers and fighters streamed across the Channel, their formations precise, their intent deadly. The RAF scrambled every available aircraft, and for the first time, the Spitfires took center stage in a decisive confrontation. James Allen led his squadron into the heart of the enemy formation. The roar of engines filled the air, punctuated by the staccato bursts of machine guns. The The Spitfires darted and weaved, each pilot calculating the angle of attack, the timing of the strike, and the movements of their opponents. Dogfights erupted above the fields and towns of southern England, a deadly dance of speed, skill, and courage. Despite being outnumbered, the RAF achieved remarkable success that day. Many German bombers were destroyed before reaching their targets, and several Luftwaffe pilots were forced to retreat in disarray. The Spitfire had proven its worth, not merely as a machine, but as a symbol that Britain could defend its skies against overwhelming odds. The pilot's courage was matched by the determination of the ground crews. Mechanics worked tirelessly to repair damaged aircraft, refuel planes, and prepare them for the next sortie. Their efforts were relentless, often continuing through the night and into the early hours of the morning. Each repaired aircraft meant another chance to defend Britain, another line of hope against the storm that threatened to engulf the nation. For the pilots, every sortie was a test of endurance and skill. The constant strain of combat, the fear of death, and the fatigue of long hours in the air tested even the most seasoned flyers. Yet, the Spitfire provided a critical advantage. Its speed allowed pilots to engage or disengage at will. Its maneuverability made it difficult for enemy fighters to maintain pursuit, and its armament, though modest compared to some Luftwaffe aircraft, was devastatingly effective in skilled hands. As the days passed, stories of heroism and daring began to circulate. Pilots recounted how a single Spitfire had turned the tide in a dogfight, how a squadron had intercepted a formation of bombers and saved an entire airfield from destruction, and how the ingenuity and courage of a few could change the course of an engagement. These stories spread across Britain, bolstering morale and reinforcing the belief that the Luftwaffe could be defeated. The rise of the Spitfire was more than a tale of technology. It was a testament to human courage, determination, and ingenuity. In the hands of the RAF, it became a weapon of both precision and inspiration. It reminded the British people that no matter how dark the skies seemed, they had a defender, agile, relentless, and unyielding. By the end of September, the Spitfire had firmly established its place in history. It was no longer merely a fighter aircraft. It was a symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope in the face of overwhelming adversity. The battles to come would be fierce, but the emergence of the Spitfire had given Britain something invaluable: the knowledge that courage, skill, and determination could stand against even the mightiest of foes. By the autumn of 1940, the Battle of Britain had entered a decisive phase. The Luftwaffe was relentless, but the British had developed a sophisticated system of defense, combining technology, strategy, and human determination. The success of Britain's air defense relied not only on the courage of individual pilots, but on a coordinated network that integrated radar, intelligence, communication, and rapid response. At the heart of this defense system was the Chain Home radar network. Spanning the southern and eastern coasts of Britain, these radar stations could detect incoming enemy aircraft from hundreds of miles away. The early warning provided by radar allowed Fighter Command to scramble Spitfires and Hurricanes with unprecedented speed. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park, commander of No. 11 Group, described it as giving the pilots a precious few minutes to meet the enemy over the channel rather than over the towns. Fighter Command's tactical approach was equally crucial. Pilots were organized into sectors, each covering specific areas of southern England. Squadrons could be moved rapidly to meet attacks, conserving fuel and maximizing effectiveness. Communication between radar stations, sector control rooms, and pilots in the air was continuous, precise, and often life-saving. Pilots learned to rely on instructions from controllers, trusting them to guide them into advantageous positions while minimizing risk. One of the most effective strategies was the use of finger four formations. Pilots flew in groups of 4, with each pair covering the other, allowing them to maneuver flexibly while maintaining mutual protection. This tactic increased their effectiveness against larger formations of enemy fighters and bombers. It allowed small squadrons to challenge numerically superior forces, a critical factor in the uneven battle over Britain's skies. The integration of intelligence also played a significant role. British codebreakers at Bletchley Park were beginning to decipher Luftwaffe communications, providing insight into German plans and objectives. Although the full impact of this intelligence would be realized later in the war, even partial knowledge allowed RAF commanders to anticipate attacks, reinforce vulnerable areas, and allocate resources efficiently. RAF pilots quickly adapted to the realities of combat. They learned to exploit altitude, speed, and the sun's position to gain tactical advantage. Dogfights became contests of skill and ingenuity, where a well-timed maneuver could mean the difference between life and death. Pilots shared lessons from each engagement, constantly improving their tactics and building collective experience. The ground crew's role in the defense strategy was equally vital. Mechanics and engineers worked tirelessly to repair damaged aircraft, maintain engines, and ensure that every Spitfire and Hurricane was ready for the next sortie. These men often worked under fire, knowing that each aircraft returned to the sky could save lives and defend the nation. Their dedication and skill formed the backbone of Britain's aerial resilience. Civilians, too, contributed in their own ways. Observers in the Royal Observer Corps reported sightings of enemy aircraft, while volunteers maintained anti-aircraft defenses and assisted in civil protection. The nation had become a single organism, united in the defense of its skies. Every citizen, from pilot to mechanic to observer, understood the stakes. The survival of their country depended on their collective effort. Despite these preparations, the Luftwaffe's attacks remained relentless. They targeted airfields, radar stations, factories, and ports, attempting to wear down British defenses. Yet, the combination of radar, tactical formations, rapid communication, and sheer determination allowed the RAF to absorb these attacks without collapsing. Each successful interception reinforced the belief that Britain could withstand the German onslaught. The strategies employed by the RAF demonstrated a remarkable blend of innovation and pragmatism. They were not merely reactive. They anticipated enemy movements, adapted to evolving threats, and leveraged every available advantage. The Spitfire, agile and responsive, became the spearhead of these strategies, translating planning and intelligence into tangible results in the skies above southern England. By the end of September, it was clear that the British defense strategy was working. The Luftwaffe's losses were mounting, while the RAF squadrons remained resilient and increasingly effective. Britain's skies had become a battleground where courage, strategy, and innovation combined to repel an enemy that had seemed unstoppable just months before. The success of these defensive measures would define the outcome of the Battle of Britain and secure a vital turning point in the war. As the Battle of Britain raged through the skies, individual pilots became legends, their courage and skill shaping the course of the conflict. Among them were men barely out of their teens, thrust into life-or-death situations above England, whose actions would inspire generations to come. Flight Lieutenant James "Jimmy" Allen had already distinguished himself in earlier engagements. On one morning in mid-September, he led his squadron to intercept a formation of 20 German bombers escorted by 12 fighters. Outnumbered, the British pilots had to rely on strategy, timing, and nerves of steel. Allen maneuvered his Spitfire with precision, diving and climbing to confuse the enemy and create openings for attack. Within minutes, his squadron had shot down multiple bombers, forcing the remainder to retreat. His leadership saved an entire airfield from destruction. Another notable figure was Pilot Officer Robert Stanford Tuck, known for his fearless approach to combat. Tuck's missions often placed him directly in the path of overwhelming enemy forces, yet he never hesitated. In one dogfight, he found himself surrounded by 6 Messerschmitt Bf-109s. Using a combination of evasive maneuvers and tactical acumen, he managed to shoot down 2 enemy fighters while avoiding serious damage. His actions earned him the respect of his peers and became a symbol of British defiance. Squadrons were also supported by international pilots, including men from Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Canada. These foreign volunteers brought invaluable experience and skill. The Polish 303 Squadron, for example, became one of the most successful units in the battle, demonstrating that courage knew no borders. Their daring attacks, often against numerically superior formations, exemplified the ingenuity and resilience that defined Britain's air defense. The personal stories of these pilots reveal the human side of aerial combat. They faced exhaustion, fear, and the constant threat of death, yet camaraderie and a sense of duty drove them forward. Pilots wrote letters home in moments of quiet, expressing thoughts of family and hope, while acknowledging the perils of the sky. Many carried photographs of loved ones in their cockpits, a reminder of what they fought to protect. One remarkable account involved a young pilot who had barely completed training. On his first mission over southern England, he engaged a formation of Heinkel bombers. Despite his inexperience, he managed to disable one aircraft, forcing it to retreat. After returning to base, exhausted and shaken, he recounted the encounter. "I realized in that moment that courage isn't about fearlessness. It's about acting even when you are terrified." Heroism was not only measured by victories in combat. Many pilots risked their lives to protect comrades or civilians on the ground. There were accounts of pilots shielding other aircraft from attacks, drawing enemy fire upon themselves to give others a chance to escape. Such acts of bravery exemplified the spirit of sacrifice that permeated fighter command. The psychological toll was immense. Pilots flew multiple sorties in a single day, often with minimal rest. They faced the trauma of losing comrades, witnessing destruction below, and the constant threat of anti-aircraft fire. Yet, each successful mission reinforced their determination, and every Spitfire that returned intact was a small victory, a testament to skill, courage, and the will to survive. By the end of September, it became evident that these individual acts of valor had a cumulative effect. The Luftwaffe, while formidable, could not break the spirit of the RAF pilots. The courage, ingenuity, and resilience displayed by men like Allen, Tuck, and the pilots of 303 Squadron ensured that Britain's skies remained contested, and that the Spitfire had truly earned its place as a symbol of resistance. The stories of these heroic pilots were more than mere accounts of aerial combat. They were narratives of determination, sacrifice, and the human spirit in extremis. Each dogfight, each narrow escape, each act of bravery contributed to a larger narrative, that a small nation facing a powerful enemy could withstand and even repel one of the greatest military forces in history. By October 1940, the Battle of Britain had escalated into a full-scale aerial conflict. The Luftwaffe was determined to crush the Royal Air Force and clear the way for Operation Sea Lion. Yet the RAF pilots had grown stronger, more experienced, and more resilient. Each sortie was a test of endurance, skill, and courage, with the skies over southern England transformed into a deadly arena where every move counted. The Spitfire, agile and responsive, became the centerpiece of Britain's defensive strategy. In countless dogfights, it demonstrated superiority against the German Messerschmitt Bf-109s. Pilots learned to exploit its strengths, climbing swiftly to gain altitude advantage, using tight turns to evade enemy fire, and timing attacks with precision. The Spitfire's presence in the air was a morale booster not only for pilots but for the people on the ground, who understood that each aircraft represented hope. One remarkable engagement occurred over the Thames estuary, where a formation of 30 German bombers, escorted by 18 fighters, advanced toward London. Squadron leader Peter Townsend led a group of 12 Spitfires to intercept. The ensuing dogfight lasted over 40 minutes, with planes diving, climbing, and twisting in a deadly dance of speed and firepower. Despite being outnumbered, the RAF pilots shot down 7 bombers and several fighters, forcing the remainder to retreat. Townsend later remarked, "That day, every pilot knew the eyes of the nation were upon them. We fought not just for survival, but for every man, woman, and child back home." In addition to the heroism of individuals, tactical innovations played a crucial role in the successes of the RAF. Pilots coordinated attacks in waves, using altitude strategically to ambush enemy formations. Wingmen covered each other, ensuring no pilot was left vulnerable. Communication with ground controllers provided real-time intelligence on enemy movements, allowing squadrons to respond rapidly to changing threats. This integration of technology, strategy, and skill became a defining characteristic of the Battle of Britain. The psychological aspect of combat was as critical as physical skill. Pilots faced immense pressure, knowing that a single mistake could be fatal. Fatigue accumulated rapidly, with some men flying multiple sorties in a single day. Yet the knowledge that their actions protected civilians and defended the homeland gave them a sense of purpose that transcended fear. Many pilots carried photographs of loved ones, letters, or personal tokens in their cockpits, reminders of why they risked their lives in the skies. As the battle progressed, Luftwaffe losses began to mount. Experienced German pilots were killed or captured, while aircraft were damaged or destroyed. Despite numerical superiority, the Luftwaffe struggled to gain air dominance, facing relentless resistance from RAF pilots who had become adept at predicting enemy tactics and exploiting weaknesses. Each victory, though hard-won, reinforced Britain's resolve and demonstrated that courage, skill, and determination could counter even overwhelming odds. The successes of the Spitfire were also symbolic. Newspaper reports, letters, and radio broadcasts highlighted the bravery of RAF pilots and the effectiveness of the aircraft, inspiring confidence among civilians and troops alike. The Spitfire was no longer just a fighter plane. It had become a national icon, representing resistance, ingenuity, and hope in a time of crisis. By November 1940, the pattern of intense aerial combat had solidified. The Luftwaffe, frustrated by repeated losses and unable to achieve decisive results, began to shift tactics. Bombing raids targeted civilian areas in an attempt to break morale, but the RAF's defensive network and the indomitable spirit of its pilots remained unbroken. The cumulative effect of these engagements was clear. Britain had survived, and the Luftwaffe's dream of dominating the skies had been thwarted. The intense battles of October and November were a testament to human courage, technological innovation, and the power of strategic coordination. Each Spitfire sortie represented not just a fight against enemy aircraft, but a fight for the nation's survival. The resilience of the pilots, the skill of the ground crews, and the support of civilians created a defense system capable of withstanding one of the most formidable air forces in history. By late November 1940, the Battle of Britain had reached a grueling rhythm. The skies above southern England were a constant theater of conflict, with Luftwaffe bombers and fighters appearing like shadows in the clouds, relentless and unyielding. The RAF, though resilient, faced challenges that tested not only their skill but their endurance and spirit. Pilots were pushed to the limits. Many flew multiple sorties per day, sometimes with only minutes to refuel and rearm between missions. Fatigue became a silent adversary, threatening to undermine even the most experienced flyers. Flight Lieutenant James Allen recalled, "There were days when your hands would shake, your mind felt numb, and every decision carried the weight of life and death. You couldn't afford hesitation. Even a second could be fatal." Mechanical failures added to the dangers. Spitfires and Hurricanes, though expertly engineered, required constant maintenance. Engines overheated, guns jammed, and instruments failed under the stress of combat. Ground crews labored tirelessly through freezing nights and drenching rains to keep aircraft operational. One pilot recounted how he had to take off in a plane that had barely passed inspection, knowing that if it failed mid-flight, there would be no mercy in the skies. Weather was another formidable challenge. Autumn storms brought thick clouds, gusting winds, and rain, reducing visibility and making navigation treacherous. Pilots had to rely on both instruments and instinct to locate the enemy and return safely. Fog and low clouds could turn a routine sortie into a deadly maze, where the slightest miscalculation meant collision or disorientation over enemy territory. The psychological toll was immense. Pilots carried the constant awareness of mortality, witnessing comrades fall and bombs raining down on the cities below. Civilian casualties weighed heavily on their minds, intensifying the sense of responsibility. Many experienced moments of terror, adrenaline, and doubt simultaneously, yet pressed forward, driven by duty, loyalty, and the knowledge that the fate of the nation rested on their wings. Civilians, too, faced extraordinary hardship. Air raid warnings became routine, families slept in shelters, and entire communities were forced to adapt to life under threat. London, in particular, endured continuous bombing raids with hospitals, homes, and factories caught in the crossfire. Despite this, morale remained surprisingly high. Citizens organized volunteer defense units, provided aid to those injured, and maintained the functioning of society under extraordinary stress. The Luftwaffe intensified their attacks during periods of perceived weakness. After sustained bombing of RAF airfields, they attempted to exploit gaps in British defenses. Pilots recalled engagements where they faced overwhelming odds, formations of 30 or 40 enemy planes pressing in on just a handful of Spitfires. The odds were terrifying, yet British pilots relied on training, instinct, and camaraderie to survive. They learned to trust each other completely, covering wings, communicating constantly, and executing maneuvers with precision under extreme stress. Supply shortages, too, created challenges. Fuel and ammunition had to be rationed carefully, and pilots often flew with the bare minimum necessary for survival. In some cases, they were forced to abandon damaged planes over friendly territory or ditch in the channel. Each decision was a gamble, a constant weighing of risk against necessity. Despite the relentless pressure, these challenges forged extraordinary resilience. Pilots and ground crews adapted to fatigue, mastered mechanical improvisations, and developed strategies to navigate the most treacherous weather. Their endurance became as vital as their skill in combat. Every successful sortie under these conditions was a testament to human perseverance, courage, and ingenuity. By the end of November, it was clear that the British approach, combining technological advantage, tactical skill, and sheer resilience, had allowed them to withstand pressures that might have overwhelmed a less determined nation. The Battle of Britain was not merely a contest of aircraft or weapons. It was a test of endurance, nerve, and the human spirit. Each pilot who returned from the skies, every mechanic who kept a Spitfire operational, and every civilian who endured nightly bombings contributed to a larger narrative of survival against impossible odds. While courage and skill defined the pilots in the skies, another quiet but crucial battle unfolded on the ground. Britain's advantage in radar technology and intelligence gathering played a pivotal role in turning the tide of the Battle of Britain. These silent guardians, often unseen by the public, ensured that the RAF could act with precision against the Luftwaffe's relentless assaults. The chain-home radar network, an array of towering stations along the southern and eastern coasts, was Britain's first line of defense. These early warning systems detected incoming enemy aircraft at distances up to 120 miles, providing precious minutes for fighter command to respond. Unlike the Luftwaffe, which relied on visual sightings and navigation over the channel, the British could anticipate attacks before planes reached the coastline. Squadron leader Peter Townsend described the impact of radar. "Without it, we would have been blind. The Luftwaffe could have struck without warning and we would have been caught in the open. Radar gave us eyes in the sky, and that made all the difference." Ground operators monitored the blips on their screens, identifying incoming formations and relaying this information to sector controllers, who then scrambled squadrons of Spitfires and Hurricanes. Intelligence, both human and cryptographic, amplified this advantage. British codebreakers at Bletchley Park had begun deciphering messages encrypted with the German Enigma machine. Although early in the war, partial decrypts allowed commanders to predict certain Luftwaffe movements, plan intercepts, and allocate resources effectively. The combination of radar detection and intelligence reports created a proactive defense system, allowing Britain to strike before the enemy could reach its targets. The coordination between radar stations, sector control, and pilots in the air was unprecedented. Pilots received continuous updates from controllers, guiding them to optimal altitudes and interception points. Wingmen were positioned strategically, ensuring coverage and protection. This level of integration allowed smaller squadrons to confront much larger formations of enemy aircraft, neutralizing the Luftwaffe's numerical superiority. Ground crews worked tirelessly to support this system. Communications lines, radar equipment, and plotting stations required constant maintenance. Engineers and technicians ensured that every signal was accurate and every transmission clear, knowing that a single failure could allow enemy bombers to reach their targets unchallenged. Their silent work behind the scenes proved as vital as the dogfights taking place above. The effectiveness of radar and intelligence was evident in key engagements. On 1 October morning, a large Luftwaffe formation intended to strike London. Radar detected the incoming bombers, while codebreakers provided partial insight into their route. RAF squadrons were dispatched in precise formations to intercept at optimal altitudes. The result was a decisive engagement. Numerous bombers were destroyed, and several fighters were shot down, all before the enemy could reach its objective. This successful defense showcased the synergy between technology, intelligence, and human skill. Moreover, the use of radar and intelligence reduced pilot fatigue and wasted sorties. Instead of randomly patrolling the skies, squadrons could be directed to intercept specific threats, conserving fuel and energy for prolonged battles. This efficiency allowed the RAF to maintain a sustained defense over months, a critical factor in repelling the Luftwaffe's relentless assaults. The psychological impact of these silent guardians cannot be overstated. Pilots gained confidence knowing that they were not acting blindly, that their actions were supported by unseen eyes and minds. Ground crews and intelligence personnel, though removed from the direct danger of combat, carried a heavy responsibility. Their expertise and vigilance created the framework within which bravery and skill could flourish. By late 1940, the integration of radar, intelligence, and tactical command had become a decisive factor in Britain's aerial defense. It transformed the Battle of Britain from a chaotic series of dogfights into a coordinated strategic struggle where human courage was amplified by technology. The Luftwaffe, while still formidable, found itself facing an enemy that was not only resilient but also increasingly adept at anticipating and countering its moves. The silent guardians of radar and intelligence had ensured that every Spitfire sortie was more than a fight for survival. It was part of a calculated, cohesive effort to protect Britain's skies. In the end, their contribution was as vital as the pilots in the air, proving that wars are won not only by courage, but by foresight, planning, and innovation. As the autumn of 1940 gave way to early winter, the Battle of Britain began to show the first signs of a shift. The Luftwaffe, though relentless and heavily armed, was losing momentum. The sustained courage of the RAF pilots, combined with superior tactics, radar intelligence, and the resilience of ground crews, had begun to turn the tide in Britain's favor. Each intercepted formation, each destroyed bomber, each Spitfire that returned safely contributed to a growing sense of hope. On several occasions in October and November, entire Luftwaffe raids were repelled with heavy losses. Squadron leader Peter Townsend recalled a particularly decisive engagement over Kent, where 30 German bombers, escorted by 18 fighters, attempted a strike on a critical airfield. Guided by radar and intercepted by Spitfires, the enemy formation was decimated. 10 bombers were destroyed, and several fighters were forced to retreat. This engagement exemplified the growing mastery of the RAF and the effectiveness of integrated defense systems. These victories were not simply about numbers, they were about morale. Every successful interception sent a message to the German High Command that Britain would not yield. Winston Churchill, in his speeches, highlighted these moments of triumph, calling upon the nation to remain steadfast. Never in the field of human conflict, he declared, was so much owed by so many to so few. The few, the RAF pilots, were rapidly becoming national heroes, symbols of courage and determination. The turning point was not just strategic, but psychological. Luftwaffe pilots began to face the same fatigue and strain as their British counterparts, compounded by extended missions over enemy territory. German losses mounted as more experienced pilots were killed or captured, while new recruits lacked the experience to effectively challenge the Spitfires. The Luftwaffe's air superiority, once assumed to be inevitable, was no longer guaranteed. On the home front, civilians witnessed these victories with a mix of relief and pride. Reports of downed enemy aircraft, heroic dogfights, and successful defenses of airfields spread rapidly. Communities that had endured nightly bombings now saw evidence that their defenders were capable, skillful, and determined. The stories of young pilots, some barely out of their teens, shooting down multiple enemy aircraft, captured the imagination of the nation and strengthened collective morale. The cumulative effect of these engagements was profound. RAF squadrons were increasingly confident in their abilities. Commanders could make bolder strategic decisions, and the Luftwaffe faced mounting challenges in maintaining sustained attacks. Each day of survival, each thwarted raid, was a step toward an eventual stalemate that would protect Britain from invasion. By December 1940, the Luftwaffe shifted tactics. The intense focus on airfields and military targets gradually gave way to bombing civilian centers in London and other cities, initiating the Blitz. While this caused devastation and hardship, it also revealed the resilience of the British people and the continued strength of fighter command. The RAF remained vigilant, intercepting bombers wherever possible and ensuring that Britain's skies were never fully dominated. The victories of late 1940 were not the end of the Battle of Britain, but they marked a critical turning point. They demonstrated that courage, preparation, and innovation could overcome even a seemingly superior enemy. The Luftwaffe's inability to achieve decisive results foreshadowed the eventual failure of Hitler's plans to subdue Britain through air power alone. For the pilots and ground crews, these victories reinforced the importance of every individual effort. Every sortie flown, every aircraft repaired, and every tactical decision contributed to the larger outcome. The Battle of Britain was no longer merely a struggle for air superiority. It had become a testament to human courage, ingenuity, and the unyielding determination of a nation defending its homeland against overwhelming odds. By the end of 1940, the Battle of Britain had fundamentally reshaped the course of World War II. The Luftwaffe, despite its early successes and numerical superiority, had failed to achieve air dominance. Britain's skies remained contested, and the nation had survived what many had feared would be a crushing assault. The courage, skill, and resilience displayed by the RF, combined with the dedication of ground crews and the ingenuity of intelligence and radar operators, had changed the trajectory of history. The lessons of the Battle of Britain were profound. First, technology and innovation could amplify human courage. The chain-home radar network and the Spitfire fighter aircraft were critical force multipliers. They allowed smaller, less numerous forces to challenge a larger enemy effectively. Innovation in tactics, such as the use of the finger four formation and coordinated intercepts, demonstrated that strategic thinking could overcome raw numbers. Second, human determination and morale were decisive factors. The pilots, young and often inexperienced, showed extraordinary bravery. They faced fatigue, danger, and the psychological pressures of constant combat, yet they persevered. Ground crews, observers, and civilians contributed in ways that, while less visible, were equally vital. Every successful sortie and every repaired aircraft underscored the importance of collective effort in achieving national defense. The battle also highlighted the importance of adaptability. The RAF constantly refined tactics, responded to enemy strategies, and made effective use of intelligence. This adaptability ensured that Britain could meet evolving threats with precision and resilience. Conversely, the Luftwaffe, rigid in its planning and underestimating the British response, suffered disproportionate losses. The human stories emerging from the Battle of Britain became legendary. Flight Lieutenant James Allen, Squadron Leader Peter Townsend, and countless others epitomized courage and skill. The international contributions of Polish, Czech, and Canadian pilots demonstrated that the defense of Britain was a global effort. These narratives inspired not only contemporaries, but future generations, cementing the Spitfire and its pilots as enduring symbols of resistance. Strategically, the victory in the Battle of Britain ensured that Hitler's plans for a cross-channel invasion, Operation Sea Lion, were indefinitely postponed. The failure to secure air superiority over Britain represented the first major setback for the Axis powers in Western Europe. It preserved a critical base of operations for the Allies from which future offensives would be launched, ultimately leading to the liberation of occupied Europe. Culturally, the battle reinforced the importance of national unity and resilience. Civilians, enduring nightly bombings and constant threat, demonstrated courage and solidarity. Communities adapted to hardships with remarkable fortitude, reflecting a societal commitment that paralleled the bravery of pilots and ground crews. The synergy between civilian endurance and military courage became a defining characteristic of Britain's wartime identity. The legacy of the Battle of Britain extends far beyond military history. It is a story of human spirit triumphing over adversity, of strategy and innovation countering overwhelming force, and of ordinary individuals performing extraordinary acts. The Spitfire, soaring over English skies, became more than an aircraft. It became a symbol of hope, resistance, and national determination. In retrospect, the Battle of Britain was a testament to the power of preparation, courage, and collective effort. It demonstrated that even against a seemingly invincible enemy, resilience, ingenuity, and unity could prevail. The skies of 1940 were not merely a theater of war. They were a proving ground for the human spirit, where determination, skill, and courage shaped the fate of a nation and altered the course of history forever. As history remembers the pilots, the Spitfires, and the ground crews, their story continues to inspire. It reminds us that in moments of immense challenge, human courage and ingenuity can shine brightest, and that the defense of one's homeland, when combined with skill and strategy, can achieve the extraordinary. The Battle of Britain remains a shining example of resilience, heroism, and the enduring triumph of the human spirit over adversity.